What is up, Memphis? Welcome to Crime Adjacent Live. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for coming out. But, as always, I need a favor. Listen like a profiler, because everything I'm about to tell you, every detail, it all matters for solving this case. On the morning of Saturday, January 3rd, 1998, the body of 17-year-old Samantha Carpenter was discovered in the kitchen of a popular sandwich shop in Fairfield, California. She had been hit on the back of the head and then stabbed. Her jeans were discovered around her ankles, and her green sandwich shop apron was pulled over her head, concealing her face. This was, quite obviously, a murder. Police even discovered the murder weapon on scene. But you're about to hear why this case has been the source of endless conspiracy theories and cover-up allegations in this small Bay Area town, because those weapons, they were never tested for prints, and Samantha's body was also never tested for DNA. Samantha Carpenter, Sam, was a bright, studious, hard-working high schooler with plans to leave this small town behind for good that year, and you're about to see why. Because the people she was supposed to be able to count on might also be the very people responsible for her murder. So let's dive straight into this case, because you won't believe what happens next. Live from Memphis, I'm Chase Patrick, and this is Crime Adjacent. John Brinks parked his blue Ford F-150 in his usual parking slot outside his sandwich shop in Fairfield, California. This is about 10 a.m. on Saturday, January 3rd, 1998, according to his police interview transcript in the 911 call. John, age 55, strolled to the front door as usual, waved hello to shoppers and passersby as usual, put his keys in the lock as usual, and then stopped dead in his tracks, his hand frozen on the key. This electric pulse came in great zinging racks throughout his entire body. Something was wrong. He knew it immediately. You see, the moment he put his key in the lock, the door pushed open. And that just shouldn't have happened. No way. The sandwich shop employee who closed this business the previous night would never, ever have simply forgotten to lock the door. Not a chance. So John said in later interviews with the police and the media that a million thoughts raced through his mind as he's standing there at the door. Vandals, vagrants, thieves. Someone had clearly broken into his sandwich shop between closing time Friday night and when John arrived to open the shop for business at 10 a.m. Saturday. That had to be it. Because the employee who closed the previous night, Friday, January 2nd, was 17-year-old Samantha Carpenter, Sam, his favorite, most trusted employee, ever, in 25 years of running the shop. So seeing the door unlocked in the morning, John expected the worst. But the strange thing is, as John nudges the door open and pokes inside, he saw that it was pristine, as it always was after a shift run by Sam. The chairs were on their tables on one side of the restaurant, the countertops all cleaned, the floors scrubbed. On the other side, where the serving counter was and where all the meats and cheeses and breads and chips were stored, everything was clean, and all the ingredients were still locked up or put away. John glanced at the cash register on the counter. That too was untouched. It was open, as it always was after the night's counting, but that wasn't unusual. Sam had even left a tiny ledger of the night's count where she always did. The pencil was still resting on the pad. John assumed the cash was locked away in his office safe, just as all the employees did during their closing routines. This didn't feel, to John, like a robbery or vandals. But John told police that as he walked further into the store, something just felt off. He couldn't place it, but he also couldn't find anything wrong. So more thoughts raced through his mind, like, chill out, it's fine, it's just a mistake, everyone makes them, even Sam. Maybe she was distracted. So John keeps going into the store. Just beyond the row of tables, there's a small hallway that leads to a back kitchen filled with freezers and storage. There's a bathroom for customers and employees, and then there is his office at the end of the hallway. And this hallway leads to a glass door in the rear of the restaurant, leading to a small parking lot in the back of the strip mall. And so John's slowly walking down this hallway towards the rear door, and he calls out, "Sam?" No answer. Of course not. She was probably long gone, enjoying her weekend by that moment. John gets to the rear glass door and tests it. It's locked. He breathes a sigh of relief. He realized Sam just probably forgot to lock the front door, and he's not even annoyed, more like relieved, like it was just a simple mistake. And nothing seems to have happened. The store looks fine. Everything is in order. So John turns around from the glass door and chuckles to himself and walks back down the hallway, shaking off all these intrusive thoughts. He turns into the small kitchen and slams to a halt again. That's when he sees her, Samantha Carpenter. She is sprawled out on the kitchen floor, her blue jeans pushed down by her ankles, her green apron spread over her face. But he knows it's her, no doubt, even though he can't see her face at this point, because he sees the bracelets on her wrist, going up in crowded bangles from her wrist to her mid-arm. During a slow moment in the shop one day, Sam, a foster child, told John that she wore a knitted friendship bracelet to remember each of her siblings she'd had in various foster homes over the years. All those bracelets meant so many different homes, so many different siblings. So John knew this wasn't a fashion thing for her, but like a statement of memory, a reminder to all the brothers and sisters she met along the way that someone cared for them. Seeing her, realizing all this, John is in shock. Sam had always held a special place in his heart. He knew she came from sort of a rough life, and she was saving up to get out of town that fall, with plans to attend business school at UC Berkeley or UCLA or maybe Santa Barbara. Her applications were due that month, January, and John even helped her with them. Sam told John that she wanted to be a business major, work in some big fancy downtown at a big office making big deals. John had no doubt that whatever she chose, she'd be fine. She'd thrive, in fact. John immediately dropped to his knees and tried his best to help her, like CPR. But he also knew, as soon as he removed the green apron from her face, that it was no use. Sam Carpenter was dead. There was no doubt. Blood pooled from a wound in the middle of her chest. She wasn't breathing. So John immediately went to the phone and called 911. Things would never be the same for John after this call. The phone call, the customers, the other shop owners in this 5-store strip mall, the employees, the foster parents, the boyfriend, John himself, all of them would be subject to one accusation after another or some baseless conspiracy for years to come. I'll get to those. They're important. But everything started with this phone call. In later interviews John gave to the local media, the Fairfield Daily Reporter in particular, John said he was just trying to help his employee, an employee he loved like one of his own daughters. He told the reporter, "I wanted to catch whoever did this, and I was just trying to help. That's it." To police, however, this 911 call struck a discordant note, to say the least. Detectives are accustomed to guilty parties trying to throw them off track. Like, "It was a man in a red truck, I swear, and I drive a blue truck, FYI, in case you're curious, a blue one." But in John's mind, he's simply reporting everything he's seeing in a panic. Like, she's been stabbed. It's a bread knife. No, he doesn't see a bloody knife anywhere, but he's thinking of all the 10-inch bread knives that he's got all around the shop. Clearly, whoever did this grabbed a bread knife, right? And her pants, they'd been pulled down. Her face, it's covered. This all feels staged, he said, like a cover-up of something else. John noted all this and told them all this. It's on the recording. Someone broke in, stabbed her, and maybe more, and then just left. Again, to John, he's in a mental fugue state at this point. He doesn't even recall this phone call, he says later. He's sad and panicked and angry and confused and in shock and trying his best to do right by his favorite employee. But to detectives, it's odd. Why so much detail? Why tell them exactly what someone else did? And importantly, why did John find her? Why did no family or friend or anyone else call this in the night before? Shouldn't her family have called police at some point to say, hey, our 17-year-old daughter is missing. She never made it home from work and someone should go look for her. But no. The first time police hear of Samantha Carpenter is from John Brinks in this very specific and very graphic phone call. The lead detective on the case, Jim Cruz, has since died. But back in 1998, he made no bones about it. John did it, no doubt. He was suspect number one from this phone call onward. In his first interviews with Detective Cruz, John said he had no alibi for the night. He said he left earlier than planned, knowing Sam could close the shop, no problem. So John went home around 5 p.m., and that was it. He napped, he had a simple dinner, and then he simply watched TV and went to bed. He was home all night, didn't leave. John lives about 10 to 15 minutes away in the Rancho Solano Country Club part of town. Golf course, pool for members, gated community. That part is key, because Detective Cruz checks all this out, and he sees that John's community transponder on his F-150 opens the Rancho Solano gate at 5:15 p.m., just as it would have if he left the shop and drove home. So that story checks out. But why? If John says he was home all night, why does his truck leave the community at 11:15 p.m. and return at 1:27 a.m.? What was he doing for nearly 2 hours when he's supposed to be home? At first, John says it's a mistake. It must be. The transponder must be off. He sticks to this story. Until police start interviewing people at the strip mall where the shop is located. There are 5 stores here along Travis Boulevard, sort of a main thoroughfare through Fairfield. There's a supermarket, and then the sandwich shop, a nail salon, a travel agent, and then, at the end, a bar. The office, it's called, like I'm headed to the office. Detective Cruz interviews the bartender, Lilibet Park, who said it seemed like a quiet night. She heard no noises, no calls for help. She had no unruly customers that night or strange occurrences at all. She remembers closing up her bar at 2 a.m. and then leaving at about 2:10 a.m. She saw the sandwich shop and all the stores, and they appeared fine. Nothing unusual. Lily, she even vouched for John, a good guy. They used to swap goods. He'd give her free food, and she'd slip him free beers from the tap. She liked him, although she said he had not been coming in as frequently as he used to. He used to head to the office practically every night after work, but had really cut back on his drinking. Lily told Detective Cruz that's why it stood out, John suddenly appearing that night. According to Lily's interview transcripts, John told her that he just couldn't sleep. He was worried about new owners of the strip mall, sort of just down in the dumps. He had a few beers, chatted, kept to himself, and then left before closing. Lily said he was there for an hour or so, maybe more, maybe less, and that he left around 1 a.m., although she can't recall exactly. This is all key for the timeline. Yes, John is at the bar, just a few doors away from the crime scene. But he's not agitated or covered in blood or giving off any clue that he just murdered a 17-year-old and then casually strolled in for a few drinks. So, if he didn't do it before headed to the office, did he do it after he left? That's what Detective Cruz tried to piece together. If John left the Rancho Solano gate at 11:15 p.m., he would have made it to the office by 11:30, tops. It's a short drive. So if he's there an hour or so, as Lily says, that's 12:30 a.m. But his gate transponder triggers his return home at 1:27 a.m. Lily is unsure exactly when he left. It was Friday. They were busy. He was there for an hour or so, but she says he left around 1. There's a lot of wiggle room here. Could he have simply headed to the sandwich shop after the bar and killed Sam then? Honestly, to me at least, that just doesn't seem likely, for a very key reason, even though Detective Cruz initially thought this was the case. After all, John had lied to him about being home all night, explaining later that he panicked under questioning. Cruz had been going hard at him at first, thinking he had killed Sam, so John decided to leave out the bar stuff. He was ashamed of his drinking, and he should have said something, sure. But again, Cruz was really going at him, and he was afraid to say that he was even close to the shop that night, despite not having anything to do with the murder. But the thing that I'm stuck up on here is the timeline of John going over to the sandwich shop to murder his favorite employee after leaving the bar, whether it's 12:30 or 1 a.m. It just doesn't make logical sense. Why? The sandwich shop closed at 9 p.m. Why would John bother going over there at all? The shop would be closed, Sam would be gone, and by 12:30 or 1 or whenever he actually left the bar, again, shop closed, Sam gone. Now, it's possible, I guess, and this is Detective Cruz's theory, that Sam stayed super late, and John saw her and went over to see what's up, and things spiraled. But John let police search his car and house and everything he owned. No blood, no weapons. The man and his house, his truck, all of it, they were all clean. Still, John Brink stayed top of mind in this case for years because of what detectives thought was a weird 911 call to shift blame onto some mysterious someone else. And then his lies about being home all night, and then the fact that he was at the bar just a few doors down the night Sam was killed. But in the end, with no hard, fast evidence linking him to the crime, Detective Cruz was eventually forced to move on to other suspects. And here's where it gets weird. Because there were so many. That's the perplexing and horrifying thing about this case. Why would a 17-year-old have so many people out to get her, even those closest to her? One thing that really stood out to Detective Cruz was that by the time John came into work Saturday at 10 a.m. and discovered Sam's body, no one had called police to report her missing. Not her family, not her friends, no one. Why? Cruz wanted to find out. He headed over to the Jones family in the nearby Woodtree neighborhood at noon Saturday, January 3rd, 1998. And still, by this time, noon, Sam had still not been reported missing. So Detective Cruz had the task of delivering the bad news that their daughter, their foster daughter, had been murdered. But he also really wanted to know why no one was looking for her. He discovered why, soon enough. The Jones house on Allegheny Lane was overrun with kids. 2 other teens, 16 and 17, and 5 kids under age 12. I need to be clear here, legally speaking, that the Jones family has never been charged with anything at all, but Detective Cruz immediately thought one thing: foster care fraud. He'd seen it before. Families get money for being foster parents, and he knew full well the county child care system was overrun and overworked. With no huge glaring red flags and a family eager to take in a kid, police and child welfare sort of ignored things like lots of kids in the same house. I need to note here that this is not the case with most foster parents. Far from it. In fact, I myself am the product of a foster family. I've mentioned this in previous seasons, but my parents kicked me out at a young age, and I lived on the streets of San Francisco for a few years before a woman named Susan found me and provided the first real home I'd ever had. Nikki, too. That's how we met. This wasn't an official foster system with paperwork and whatever. Susan simply opened her home to kids like her, kids she knew needed a second chance. So none of this is to degrade the Jones family and their efforts to do the same for other kids. But to Detective Cruz, they were simply overwhelmed and not really paying attention to the older kids, especially Samantha. She was nearly 18, had a solid job, great prospects, and would be on her way to college soon enough. From the Jones point of view, she was basically an adult, and they provided a roof over her head and not much else. She didn't need much else. But the Jones family, Bob Jones in particular, admitted things had been difficult in the past few weeks. You see, the Jones family discovered that Sam had saved $6,000 in cash, her starting over money when she went to college that fall. To Sam, it was her nest egg on a new life. To the Jones family, it was a sign she should be paying her own way with a little rent money each month. The county paid a monthly stipend for her care, but the Jones family said it wasn't fair that Sam wouldn't also chip in now that she could. It was a big source of tension, and Sam had been spending less and less time at the Jones house because of it. Bob Jones said when they all woke up the next morning, Saturday, he thought Sam had come home and simply left again. Or maybe she spent the night at a friend's. He wasn't sure and not really worried. Again, to them, she was a fully independent adult, even if she wasn't officially 18 yet and on her own. She did her own thing, more or less biding her time until college. Still, the thought stuck with Detective Cruz. Would they kill her over $6,000 in some rent money? Absolutely not, Bob Jones insisted. But the spotlight and conspiracies have never left them over the past nearly 30 years. Because in the end, with no one else to give it to, the Jones family did indeed wind up with all of Samantha's saved $6,000.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
For the night of the murder, the Jones family all had alibis. Bob, his wife Ann, and the kids, especially the older ones. They were all accounted for at home that night. Police talked to all the kids, the neighbors. They all seemed clear. So police eventually turned to the restaurant. And who was there that night? Who had access to Sam that night? And who might want to do this? John Brinks was practically apoplectic when he learned who was at the restaurant that night. He wondered, why did they target John when Chris was there? And by Chris, he meant Samantha's boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, Christopher Chris Stapleton. Like the Jones family and the money, this new tidbit of information has only created more conspiracy theories and dark rumors over the years. And honestly, I'm with John on this one. John wonders if he came under so much suspicion early on, not because of his 911 call and his trip to the bar, but because of this boyfriend. Sam didn't have a lot of friends. She was super independent, driven, eager to get out of Fairfield. She wasn't at the top of her class, but close, really close. She just wasn't all that social and wasn't invited to all the parties. She had one good friend, Alyssa Heaps, and Alyssa says Sam was annoyed that day. Angry, really. She had been seeing Chris, also 17, and they had been steady, but not super steady. Not like star-crossed teenage lover stuff, not from Sam's perspective anyway. Sam told Alyssa that she liked Chris enough, but also knew they wouldn't last. He wasn't the one. Chris wanted to do a local law enforcement program at the local community college after high school, and Sam wanted to get out of town. Sam, by Alyssa's account, knew their time was limited, and she made it clear to Chris that she always thought so. But Chris had a different version of the relationship, apparently. He was all in, 100%, and he was getting more and more annoyed that Sam didn't see things the same way. They had been seeing each other for a few months. Things were good. He was driven to be a cop, and he wondered why she couldn't go to the community college with him, or maybe nearby UC Davis. It's close. This had been a growing source of tension in their relationship, this sort of countdown timer to graduation and their plans afterwards. According to Alyssa, Sam and Chris had a big blowout that day, Friday, January 2nd, just as Sam showed up for work at the sandwich shop. Now, June and graduation might seem like a long way off, but applications were due that month, January, for fall college. And Sam made it clear to Chris that day that no, she would not alter her plans. She wanted to get away from Fairfield, to start over. And so Chris broke things off, right then and there. And according to Alyssa, Sam just very coolly, matter-of-factly said, "Okay, fine, I understand. See you later." Again, to her, this was a nice friendship-type relationship, and she was fine with ending it in January versus later in the summer. Chris got angry, like really pissed. He stomped off and cursed and swore, and people saw his late model Ford Mustang hightail it out of the sandwich shop parking lot at about 4 p.m. Friday, just really burning rubber down the street. Alyssa, who was also there, and Sam, they talked about it. Sam said she was sad and angry, like she was very upfront from the beginning about her intentions, and if this was his reaction, it only solidified it for her. She had seen her fair share of male violence in various homes over the years. She was done, And Alyssa said, yes, absolutely, right decision, move on. Okay, that's a lot of teen drama, I know, but that's the backstory, and it's important for what happens later this night. Because Alyssa, who gave her account to the cops and the press later, said she got a phone call from Sam at 8 p.m. that night, Friday. And Sam told her that Chris was in the sandwich shop, alone. He didn't order anything. He didn't say anything. He just sat at one of the tables along the wall, opposite the serving counter and the cash register, and he was just staring at Sam, fists clenched. It got very uncomfortable, and Sam called Alyssa, like, what do I do? He's been here a while, and he's creeping me out, and I have to close at 9 p.m. in an hour, and I don't want him here. So Alyssa gets in her white Geo and hauls ass to the shop herself and confronts Chris, like, what the hell? This is not okay. You need to leave, now. Sam was afraid to make a scene. Alyssa was not. And it worked. Chris left. Alyssa and Sam watched as Chris peels out of the parking lot in his Mustang, burning rubber again. This is about 8:15 p.m. or so, according to Alyssa. Alyssa sticks around for a bit, but it's sort of a busy night, and Sam is busy with 3 other customers, all couples. Except for one man, Alyssa remembered. A man in a dark newsboy cap, which was noticeable. Few people wore those. He's seated near the window, nursing a Coke and a prime rib French dip, the reason everyone comes to this shop for dinner. It's a local favorite. A few more customers come and go. Alyssa thinks the guy in the cap goes to the bathroom. She can't be sure. And Sam is busy, and Alyssa has a big party to go to, so she leaves. Chris is gone. The danger is past. So Alyssa leaves at 8:30 p.m. and heads home to get ready for her Friday night party. And that, she said, is the last she sees her friend. Alyssa told the Daily Reporter at the time, back in 1998, that night will haunt me for the rest of my life. Like I said, there's a lot of conspiracies surrounding this case, and the major one is why John Brinks, who could never be placed in a room that night with Sam, was considered the key suspect when Chris was quite literally with her in the afternoon, and then again at night, a noticeably pissed off and perhaps violent ex-boyfriend. Indeed, it's well established that it's usually not random strangers or undocumented immigrants who are the biggest threats to girls and women. It's romantic partners, especially during breakups, according to quite literally all Justice Department, CDC, and domestic violence stats. The CDC says 55 to 60% of female homicide victims are killed by current or former partners. Police know this. They always focus on the boyfriend or the husband or the romantic partner. True crime fans know this. So why, then, did John Brinks come under fire? And Bob Jones? Why not Chris Stapleton, the boyfriend? Although Detective Cruz and the police chief and everyone involved in this case denied it and still deny it, John Brinks is sure he knows why they looked everywhere but Chris. It turns out Chris's dad, Steve Stapleton, was the chief of police for the next town over. So maybe not Fairfield itself, but close. And these are all small towns. They're all connected to each other by Interstate 80, and all the chiefs work together frequently and know each other very well. And so Steve Stapleton, the chief, told Fairfield police a different story than Alyssa's account. He said yes, his son stopped at the sandwich shop. From their point of view, Chris simply tried to talk about it, but Sam didn't want to. So then, according to Chief Stapleton anyway, Sam calls her friend and, quote, blows it out of proportion. So then Alyssa shows up and yells at Chris, who then drives immediately home to nearby Shelby Court, close to Sam's house in the Woodtree neighborhood, actually. And that's it. Steve vouches for him. Chris left the sandwich shop at 8:15, just as Alyssa said, and was home all night after that with the chief of police himself. I mean, that's a great freaking alibi if you can get it. It gets more involved after this. 2 years later, in 2000, Chief Steve Stapleton was killed in the line of duty in a freak officer-involved shooting. And then, a few years after this, Chris Stapleton becomes a police officer himself, in Fairfield, just as he planned. Chris declined to comment for this story, just as he has steadfastly declined to be interviewed by the press over the years. But That story and that alibi from Chief Stapleton at the time was more than enough for Detective Cruz. Chris didn't do it. Yes, he was in the shop. Yes, he was clearly pissed off. People saw him angry earlier in the day. Sam said he spooked her half to death that night to the point of calling Alyssa, who said he was pissed and just staring at Sam, angry. But he had this alibi, and he was the chief's son. So Cruz said he looked elsewhere pretty quickly. And that was it for the investigation into the angry boyfriend. But the thing is, after news of the murder broke, other customers in the shop came forward. They also said they saw Chris, who did indeed look angry and out of place, just sitting at a table with no order, as Sam and Alyssa said, not trying his best to mend a relationship as his dad, the chief, had claimed. One couple, Bernice and Howard Park, they said they saw Chris, yes, they saw Alyssa, and they saw this mysterious man in the newsboy cap by the front window who did indeed go to the bathroom, but they also lost track of him after that. This couple, Bernice and Howard, would be key to what happened in the shop that night, who was there, and where everyone was. So Bernice and Howard had plans to go to a movie that night, and they remembered it started at 9:45 p.m., so they just sort of killed time chatting at the shop until closing. They were the last customers. They were sure of it. They watched as Sam cleaned up, removed all the ingredients, started wiping tables. They watched, they said, as she moved to the front door and put her key in it. They're sure of it. No doubt. They watched as she turned the key to make sure no other customers could come in. Bernice said she remembered this detail because it was their big clue, like, time to go. It's now clearly closing time. Like he did with John Brinks, Detective Cruz gave Bernice and Howard the business. Big time. They were the last people to see Sam alive. Did they do it? They were alone with Sam. They had opportunity for sure. But Bernice produced a movie ticket, and friends they were meeting with vouched for them. They met at 9:30 across town and watched the movie together, not really the actions of a couple who just murdered a 17-year-old a few minutes prior. According to the court transcript, Bernice remembered a key detail in this case. Because they were still in the shop when Sam locked the door, they asked Sam to unlock it, and they said goodbye and walked away. And Bernice remembers this next part very clearly. She and Howard walk away, and Bernice hears the door lock behind her. She's sure of it. Sam locked the door that night as the last customers left. No question. She heard it. So now, Sam is alone in this locked sandwich shop just after 9 p.m. So then, who? This has been the source of so many of these wild conspiracies. What I mean is, if the door was locked that night, according to Bernice, but then unlocked when John Brinks arrived Saturday morning, did Sam leave and forget to lock it? Well, no, obviously. That's impossible. Sam was murdered inside the shop. So if we're working under the theory that Sam definitely locked the door after Bernice and Howard left, and yet the door was still discovered unlocked the next day, who unlocked it? It had to be Sam, right? She's the only one in the shop at this time. So did someone arrive, knock on the glass, and Sam unlock the door to let them in? I know, profilers. I know what you're thinking. But Detective Cruz, it turns out, apparently did not, or claims he did not. This person who Sam had to unlock the door for, that couldn't be a stranger, right? Sam had to know this person, feel safe enough to unlock the door and let them in, right? Well, there's always been a strange twist in this case. Remember that mysterious man in the newsboy cap? Alyssa saw him. Bernice and Howard saw him. He is the only person unaccounted for and unnamed that night. This was on Detective Cruz's mind as the investigation grew colder and colder. And to be fair, this isn't a stretch, an anonymous drifter who slipped in and out. Did that man slip into the bathroom, hide, and wait for closing? Did he jimmy the rear door? I'm thinking of the Austin yogurt shop murders here, in which 14 girls, basically the same age as Sam, were murdered back in 1991, and their case remained unsolved for years. 4 other teens who were there were later convicted, but their charges dropped and sentences commuted because of false confessions and evidentiary issues. I won't get too deep into it. One was even sentenced to death for this crime. Despite the fact, we now know, that a serial killer by the name of Robert Eugene Brashers has officially been identified as the killer, as he left behind DNA and bullet evidence linking him to this crime. No doubt, it's him. A drifter. Was that what happened here? It wasn't Chris, or John, or Bob, or anyone other than some mysterious stranger who slipped in between all these cracks, appeared suddenly in Sam's life, killed her, and then slipped away again. That feels terrifying to me. Like, where is he now? And what else has he done? Brashers killed at least 8 people throughout the South in the 1990s. Was this mysterious man with the dark newsboy cap in the sandwich shop the same? An itinerant murderer who plied his horrible trade and simply vanished into the night? Detective Cruz said he checked it out, sort of, but John Brinks was always the main suspect in his eyes. The lying, the drinking, the proximity to the crime scene. Cruz retired in 2015 and died in 2021 of COVID-related complications. But Cruz had his suspect. End of story. It was John. This next part, I warn you, is infuriating and the source of so many allegations about a cover-up inside these small Bay Area police departments. The case remained cold until 2022, when a new detective was assigned, 24 years after the murder. And this detective, Linda Wilson, ran through all the evidence again and discovered holes, to put it mildly. Like the murder weapon, it was, just as John Brinks speculated in his initial 911 call, a bread knife. It was found under a kitchen freezer just feet from Sam's body, and it had a fingerprint on it, which was never tested. The theory at the time, according to Detective Cruz, was that this was a communal kitchen. It could be anyone's. Why bother? For real, that was his reasoning. But there's more. Sam was knocked over the head, surprised from behind. That weapon, bloody, was also found under the kitchen freezer, a short wooden dowel, and it also had a print on it. And also, it was never tested. And then, Sam's fingernails. Guess what? They had what appeared to be skin residue under them, as if she perhaps scratched her attacker in a fight before she was stabbed in the heart. Was this the killer's DNA? Well, you guessed it. Never tested. What was even happening? This makes no sense. Was one police department really covering for another? It sure looked like it, to Wilson even. She knew who Chris was. In fact, she knew he still worked in her police department in 2022 as she began to work this case. But there's an extra, sadder, tragic component to this case. If police did not do their initial due diligence and obvious testing, no one pushed for answers either. A lot of times, murder victims have someone championing their cause from the outside. No one did here. Sam had no brothers or sisters, no family. Her most recent foster parents, the Jones, seemed most concerned about the $6,000 in their full house of other foster children. They moved on, quickly. They both declined to comment for this story. John Brinks was too busy being labeled a suspect and basically stopped asking questions. After a few years, no one was really doing anything, including Detective Cruz, who it turns out was not just colleagues with Chief Stapleton at the time, but good friends. They rode motorcycles together all the time. Detective Linda Wilson discovered that Cruz, wait for it, was godfather to Steve's son, Chris, and even helped Chris land his police officer job in Fairfield. And again, at the time, no one is questioning any of this or demanding answers. So Sam's case just slipped through the cracks. All this evidence untested, all these connections unknown. So fast forward to 2022, when Detective Wilson took over. That's when this case took a turn so sudden it would send shockwaves through this small town. You see, Detective Wilson wasn't just assigned to this cold case. She was drawn to it, determined to solve it, to get answers, yes, but to speak for Sam, finally. It turns out that, like Sam and me and Nikki, Detective Wilson is also a foster child. Her parents were never in the picture, and when her grandmother died, she was moved around a lot in the system. Sam, driven, serious, independent, smart, curious, hardworking, with a future she planned to carve out for herself, this reminded Wilson of herself in a way, of all the foster kids, the good foster families she got to know. Wilson spoke to the San Francisco Chronicle for an interview later and said, "When I think of foster kids, I think of our kids. I know it's trite, but if it really does take a village, these really are, especially are, the village children, and we have a duty to care for them." And believe me, she did. Wilson immediately had the prints tested from the bread knife, and there was a match. She had the wooden dowel tested, and again, there was a match. The same match, same prints on the bread knife and the dowel. What were the odds? So she then, just to really seal the case here, had the DNA tested, and there was no match. Whoever DNA was under Sam's fingernails had never been tested and put into CODIS, the National DNA Database. Undeterred, Detective Wilson didn't want to get a warrant of the matching prints person for a DNA test, just to not give them a heads up, because she knew, given who this person was, who the prints belonged to, they would be protected. No doubt. So Wilson waited outside this person's house on Shelby Court in Fairfield and dug through their trash late at night, at the curb. This is fair game for evidence collection. You don't need a warrant, as all this trash is out in public now. It's how the Golden State Killer and the Idaho College student murderer's identities were confirmed. And it's exactly how Detective Wilson was able to confirm, with no doubt, exactly whose prints were on the murder weapon and whose DNA was under Sam's fingernails. And this person, it turns out, was not John or Bob Jones or even the disgruntled, angry boyfriend, Chris. No, the killer was none other than Sam's own good friend, Alyssa Heaps. Detective Wilson was shocked but not surprised based on her profiling of the crime scene. This was not a murder committed by a seasoned pro like a traveling serial killer who knew what he was doing. No, this was an amateur, a young, panicked amateur. The dowel and the bread knife were hurriedly hidden under a kitchen freezer as if police wouldn't find them. And then the prints, the fingernails, then the staging of the body, pants pulled down as if assaulted, but then the apron pulled over her head as if the killer didn't want to be seen by this person who trusted them or was perhaps feeling guilty. Wilson thought surely it was Chris at first based on all this, but when she brought Alyssa in for questioning after the DNA test, the story fit all the evidence. I went deep into teen drama earlier, and that's basically it. Alyssa, it turns out, really liked Chris, was in love with him. But that day, Friday, Alyssa was feeling more and more angry about Sam. Alyssa thought Sam was far too cold and harsh on Chris during their breakup in the afternoon. And then when Alyssa sees that Chris is at the shop, clearly wanting to get back with Sam, Alyssa gets even angrier. So she went back to the sandwich shop that night after it closed. And who else would Sam unlock the door for than her own good friend, or the person she thought was her friend? Alyssa told Detective Wilson that she wasn't planning anything other than a talk, like, "Hey, you're being a real jerk here." But then she just kept getting madder and madder, realizing Chris liked this girl who didn't care for him at all, not like Alyssa did. Things got heated, and she saw the dowel and the knife, and Sam turned around, and things got out of hand, and suddenly they were fighting, and Alyssa stabbed her friend who collapsed and died instantly. Alyssa panicked. She made a half-hearted attempt to stage the scene as if it was a robbery or a sexual assault. She hurriedly threw the weapons under a freezer, and then she fled, leaving the door unlocked behind her. Alyssa went home. She told no one. And as all suspicions fell to John, or Bob, or even Chris, she stayed quiet for years. Do you want to hear the real kicker of it all? Because I know what you must have picked up on. Shelby Court. Didn't Detective Wilson take garbage from a house on Shelby Court? Isn't that where Chris Stapleton lives, in Fairfield, in the Woodtree neighborhood? Yes, you'd be right. Good catch. But as of 2022, so did Alyssa. It's Alyssa Stapleton now. After Sam's death in 1998, Alyssa and Chris forged a bond. Alyssa lost a friend, she said. Chris lost a girlfriend, and over the years they grew closer and closer and closer until they were married. There is no record of whether Chris knew of his wife's secret. He claimed in police interviews, internal interviews, that he never knew. And again, Chris has declined all media requests. Alyssa confessed to the crime and was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, which I think is probably one more indignity thrown Sam's way. Usually in California, a sudden fight escalating into a death, that's charged as voluntary manslaughter and carries a slightly longer prison sentence. But again, no one's really advocating for Sam, and Alyssa had the full weight of the law enforcement community behind her at this point. So in the end, for killing her friend in what was considered a heated argument and accidental death, despite evidence pointing otherwise, like a staged crime scene, Alyssa was sentenced to 2 years and has already been released on parole. She remains in Fairfield with her husband, Chris. Detective Wilson got in touch with John Brinks, whom she found actually just really liked Sam, his best employee ever, and together they held a small memorial after the conviction. It was just the two of them outside the sandwich shop, or where the sandwich shop used to be, telling each other some future version of Sam that made it out of Fairfield and worked in some big city for some big business, happy, like she dreamed. Wilson slipped something out of an evidence bag, and together, she and John, they each put on one of Sam's friendship bracelets, like a statement of memory, a reminder that someone, two someones, cared for her. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Nikki and I will be in the merch line signing all night, however long it takes. I hope to see you there. And I will definitely see you in Portland next week with another case you simply will not believe. Until next week, I'm Chase Patrick, and this is Crime Adjacent.